So in this question, we have FlexCorp, and they manufacture eyeglasses throughout the United States. So they do some very important work so that all the men and women in the United States and around the world can see. What would we do without glasses or contacts? Now, as part of the year 5 financial review, the company determined that the actual raw material cost per unit was $5 lower than the standard or budget amount per eyeglass, right? So that's good. If we think back to direct material, well, if the price is $5 lower, that is a favorable direct materials price variance because we're simply focused on the price here, meaning they paid $5 less to acquire this material from their vendors or suppliers. So that's a favorable variance. Now we need to think about how we can describe that when we're in the role of the purchasing manager to the chief financial officer. What is a valid reason as to why that actual cost was lower? So I really like this type of question. A lot of variance questions are focused purely on calculations. This one really makes you think, okay, how can I interpret this result? What is a valid reason for why we're seeing this business result? It really puts you in the mindset of being in this production process in a role as a purchasing manager. So let's get after it. So this first one says our key vendors raised their prices due to an increase in commodity prices for materials purchased. Now that does directly impact the price paid to the supplier or vendor for each unit of material, but because commodity prices increased, well, that means also that the company would have had a higher actual cost, but they had a lower actual cost. So this is not going to be the case, right? Because that would have led to an unfavorable variance, meaning the price paid was higher than what they had budgeted, right? So that's going to be incorrect. So this next one says, due to an increase in volume purchased from our suppliers, we're able to negotiate a volume discount, which reduced the cost per unit. And that actually makes a lot of sense, right? Because from a supplier's perspective, the more they produce, well, they have economies of scale as well. So if they produce 1 unit, it can be very expensive per unit. If they produce 1,000 units, it's going to get cheaper. If they produce 100,000 units, it's going to continue to get cheaper and cheaper. And as a purchaser, we want to take a cut of that cost savings as well. So we would negotiate a larger volume discount if the volume purchased increases, right? So that would reduce our overall cost. So that actually perfectly describes why the actual raw material cost per unit was lower. That's favorable for the company. It's favorable for us. And because we purchased it at a lower rate, that would explain why the actual cost was $5 lower. So that is a great candidate for being the correct answer, but let's check the last two. How about we decided to increase the hourly rate paid to manufacturing employees to obtain higher skilled labor, which increased the efficiency of labor used in the production process? So a few things here, right? That actually impacts the direct labor rate. It would have increased that rate, right? The actual rate would have been higher than the standard rate. But again, that relates to direct labor and not direct materials. So while that's great, that is not something that the purchasing manager would be responsible for. That would be either the HR manager or maybe the production manager, but not the purchasing manager. So it would be odd for them to start talking about labor. So that's going to be incorrect. And then lastly, it says we redesigned the production process, which decreased the amount of raw material needed to produce each finished eyeglass. So let's say that before it took 2 units of raw material, but they improved the production process. So now it only takes 1.5 units, right? That means less direct material will be used in the production process. But that actually relates to the direct material usage variance. It has nothing to do with the actual price paid. Right? So while that is related to the overall direct material variance, it would not relate to what we see from the purchasing manager's perspective because they're focused on the cost paid to suppliers. This is more focused on how efficient were we with the usage of our materials. That's the responsibility of the production manager, so that's going to be incorrect. So what we're left with is that option that relates to a volume discount, and that makes complete sense. So the correct answer is going to be due to an increase in volume purchase from our suppliers, we were able to negotiate a volume discount which reduced the cost per unit. That perfectly describes why the actual raw material cost was lower than the standard or budgeted rate and resulted in a favorable variance for the company during year 5. The purchasing manager would love to stand up at that year 5 financial review and say, "Yep, I did my job correctly. Give me a huge bonus."